I'm Amy Goodman. Pope Francis has died at the age of 88. The Argentinian-born Jesuit had led the Catholic Church since 2013, when he made history by becoming the first pope from Latin America and the first Jesuit pope. He made his last public appearance yesterday, Easter Sunday, when he repeated his call for a ceasefire in Gaza, saying the situation was dramatic and deplorable. The Pope briefly spoke, then had Archbishop Diego Reveles read his Easter message.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, buona Pasqua.
Dear brothers and sisters, happy Easter.
Maestro delle cerimonie.
I ask the Master of Ceremonies to read the message.
I express my closeness to the sufferings of Christians in Palestine and Israel, and to all the Israeli people and the Palestinian people. The growing climate of anti-Semitism throughout the world is worrisome, yet at the same time, I think of the people of Gaza, and its Christian community in particular, where the terrible conflict continues to cause death and destruction, and to create a dramatic and deplorable humanitarian situation.
The Pope's statement Sunday echoed his past comments. In 2023, on his December 17th birthday, the Pope appealed for an end to the terrorism of war.
And let us not forget our brothers and sisters suffering from war in Ukraine, Palestine, Israel, and other conflict zones. May the approach of Christmas strengthen our commitment to open paths of peace. I continue to receive from Gaza very serious and painful news. Unarmed civilians are being bombed and shot at. And this has even happened inside the Holy Family Parish compound, where there are no terrorists, but families, children, and sick people with disabilities, and nuns. A mother and her daughter, Miss Nahida Khalil Antan, and her daughter Samar Kamal Antan, were killed and others wounded by the snipers as they went to the bathroom. The house of Mother Teresa's nuns was damaged. Their generator hit. Some say it's terrorism. It's war. Yes, it's war. It's terrorism. That is why Scripture says that God stops war, breaks bows, and breaks spears. Let us pray to the Lord for peace.
Pope Francis was also a vocal champion for the poor and marginalized, and spoke out often about the climate crisis and against the death penalty. On Thursday, the Pope traveled to a prison in Rome to meet with dozens of prisoners as part of his Holy Thursday ritual. On Sunday, Pope Francis briefly met with Vice President J.D. Vance. In February, before the Pope was hospitalized, he openly criticized the Trump administration's attacks on migrants. The Pope wrote, quote, "The act of deporting people who in many cases have left their own land for reasons of extreme poverty, insecurity, exploitation, persecution, or serious deterioration of the environment damages the dignity of many men and women and of entire families and places them in a state of particular vulnerability and defenselessness," unquote. For more, we're joined by three guests: the Palestinian Christian theologian Reverend Munther Isaac in Bethlehem, Marie Dennis, director of the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative at Pax Christi International, and Robert Ellsberg, publisher of Orbis Books, editor of Pope Francis's book, A Stranger and You Welcomed Me, a call to mercy and solidarity with migrants and refugees. We welcome you all to Democracy Now! Thank you so much for joining us. Marie Dennis, let's begin with you. The life and legacy of the Pope, if you can talk about it.
Yes, thank you so much. What a gift he has been over these years. From the very beginning, both his way of life, his own witness, and his words have pointed in the direction of peace, of mercy, of nonviolence. Pope Francis, as many of us remember, immediately after he was elected, gestured by even what shoes he was going to wear and by where he was going to live and by what car he was going to ride in, his own personal commitment to be close to those who were poor and marginalized in our world. And he has continued that throughout his papacy.
talk about where he took the church when it came to LGBTQ issues, when it came to abortion. He just went to a prison to visit with prisoners, apologized for not washing their feet on Thursday, but said he was not well. If you can talk about all these issues.
Of course. Pope Francis, I think it's important to begin by saying that Pope Francis began, when he addressed almost any issue, he would begin with experience, with the experience of people at the margins who were on the receiving end of whatever form of violence or rejection was being exercised. So, for example, with migrants, his first gesture was to go to meet with migrants, to understand their journeys, to understand what motivated them to leave home. When he was challenged by those who were abused by priests and others in the church, he listened to the survivors of that abuse. He listened to LGBTQ representatives, people who were on the receiving end of the exclusion of LGBTQ in our church. And he began to both shift his own understanding of a particular situation and to begin to change practice in the church. I think his consistent commitment was to life, but he described that broadly. He talked about violence, the violences that were done to destroy life, that were multifaceted, as you said, beginning with war, with overt violence, with exclusion of migrants, and on and on. So he did not limit the church's understanding of commitment to life to only the issue of abortion, but stretched our imagination to understand that to protect life meant to promote a world of peace, of justice, and to find nonviolent ways to move into the future.
And women.
Yes, and women. Pope Francis, as is often the case, Pope Francis began to listen to women, to hear the experience of women, and he took some quite significant steps to move women into positions of leadership in the institutional church, very high-level positions, which was significant in the Catholic Church. He was not yet ready to talk about women's ordination or to make a change in terms of ordination of women in the Catholic Church. But he, especially during the very large synod process where people from around the world were invited to share their experience and their opinions, he listened carefully, I think, to the insistence of women around the world that we needed to be fully a part of the leadership in the church. So some small steps in that direction, at least a door was open.
I wanted to go to Reverend Munther Isaac, Palestinian Christian theologian, pastor at the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church in Bethlehem. Last Christmas, he delivered a sermon titled "Christ is Still in the Rubble." His forthcoming book is titled "Christ in the Rubble, Faith, the Bible, and the Genocide in Gaza." If you can talk about the Pope's stand as late as yesterday, hours before his death, he called for a ceasefire in Gaza, and of course, in the last year, has gone way beyond that. Reverend Munther Isaac.
Yes, this is, of course, a great loss to all humanity, and particularly to the Christian world, to the Catholic world, and we really lament and grieve his loss. And I think that Pope Francis's position on Palestine is just an extension of his theology and pastoral care in general, caring for the marginalized and victims of injustice. What he has done and exhibited and said throughout the war on Gaza was not the first time he spoke for the plight of Palestinians. I think no Palestinian will ever forget when Pope Francis in 2014 stopped his car stepped down and prayed at the separation wall separating Jerusalem from Bethlehem, a moment that touched all of us and continued to speak to us for years. And during the war on Gaza, I think he reflected two very important elements. First, his pastoral heart, his compassion. He spoke almost on a daily basis to the Church of the Holy Family in Gaza. He genuinely cared. He often even joked with them. He would pray with them, which reflect his heart of compassion. But I think his words also went beyond the standard pray for peace kind of language of many church leaders. And this is the distinction of Pope Francis, his courage, his always seeking to push things forward. He spoke, as we heard, on the war as terror, as cruelty. And I think one of the most important things he has said was in a book in which he called for investigation as to whether what Israel has committed in Gaza amounts to a genocide. To me, this is extremely important because it calls for accountability, and it shows that he's more than just compassion and peace. He's for justice. He's for accountability, and I think this is really what's missing from the language of many faith leaders. He was exemplary in that.
Now, you are not a Catholic, but talk about his effect on Christians throughout the West Bank and Gaza, on Muslims as well, as he pushed for more understanding of the Islamic faith, as he talked about migrants, and making this a centerpiece of what he said. It's very interesting, as he called for a ceasefire in Gaza yesterday, the same day that he met with the Vice President of the United States for a number of seconds.
Yes. It's important then to note that here is a Lutheran pastor speaking about Pope Francis as a leader for all of us, because he truly and genuinely reflected, in my opinion, the ideals of the gospel. He was a true follower of Jesus, and he exemplified, not just in words, but in actions, the teachings of Jesus. And as I said, he was truly beloved for us in Palestine because he made us feel recognized in a time when many tried to ignore and dehumanize Palestinians. The way he spoke about Arabs, Muslims in general, I mean, even when there was attacks on the Christian community by some Islamic groups, he would make sure that we distinguish between, for example, what Islam says and what these fringe or radical groups do, warning from the dangers of Islamophobia. So he truly understood the danger of the polemic language that exists in many of our politicians today, and tried to be a bridge builder and fight stereotypes, recognizing that extremism exists in all faith traditions. And for all of that, as I said, he is truly beloved by many who are in the fringe, marginalized, and including here as well in Palestine. And I think you mentioning his meeting with Vice President Vance, I think it's important because in the coming days, and I'm sure we will hear so many good things said from politicians about Pope Francis, the very same politicians who would go on and ignore everything he taught and said, which is never new. I mean, we've seen the same happen with people like Desmond Tutu and others, for example, on the issue on apartheid in Palestine and so on. So it's going to be interesting to see hypocrisy manifested from the mouth of many politicians who will say all good things about Pope Francis, then go on contradicting many of the things he taught and sought to establish throughout his ministry, whether as a priest, as a bishop, archbishop, cardinal, and of course as Pope.